so much for having me here today. This is the first time I've come up here where you're here. This is so cool. I love this. It's so light and airy, and the other place is wonderful, but I just think this is exciting, and I think it's really neat to be with you here today. So I was asked to say just a couple of things about myself for any of you who don't know me. So I've been a minister for about, I guess about 17 years now with CSL. And I was the spiritual director for 8 or 9 years in Paradise. And then, of course, we all know what happened in Paradise. And so that was a real pleasure, but I moved on. And actually, in the midst of all that, I believe that when we think about the foundation of our belief system in metaphysics and new thought, is that we always have to look for the new beginnings. We always have to look for the butterfly to come forth. And so what I was able to do as a result of that was to circle back in a different way to something that's very near and dear to my heart. So besides being a minister for those years, I have spent over 30 years in varying degrees of counselor by my name. I was a group counselor in juvenile corrections with Solano County for 20 years, where I worked with people ranging from the ages of 13 to 24 in different programs. And so group counseling, that was the idea of behavior modification and things like that. I also spent some time working in a drug rehabilitation program in parole. I did that for about 7 years. And so now, in circling back, I came back into, I'm a substance abuse and addiction counselor at the Skyway House in Chico. I did residential for 4 years, and now I've done outpatient for about 3 years. And it's a real passion of mine. I've been working around, addiction has been a big part of my life for many, many years, and I've been on all kinds of sides of it, and it means the world of recovery means a lot to me, so that's kind of who I am and what I am. So there is a tradition within New Thought and metaphysics around religious science and unity and all of our sister organizations that comes to us from Emma Curtis Hopkins, who she was referred to as a teacher of teachers. And she did a lot of writing, and she was involved with Mary Baker Eddy at one time, but she broke away and really began to develop her own ideas. And but one of her seminal works is Practical Mysticism, which is a very, very amazing book. It comes to us from the early 20th century. Very thick read, very difficult to get through. I think left to my own devices, I don't know if I could have done it, but I went through it in classes. And so you have to kind of, it's one of those things where you take a paragraph, then you chew on it for about 2 days, you know what I'm saying? And you go back and chew some more sometimes and things like that. But but she was absolutely brilliant, and she was a teacher to Ernest Holmes and many more people in our movement, a few generations ahead of us. One of the ideas that she had within Practical Mysticism, which I loved, was she referred to the 350 names of God. And basically what that was is she decided that what we really need to do is to take the lid off how we name and see God, because you know, if we think about the power of words in our life, when we name something, when we define something, it automatically becomes kind of a box. It automatically becomes kind of a lid. And for those of you who study this philosophy, you know that our job is to take the lid off. It's about taking it out of the box. And so a lot of our Western culture, I would argue, we have been so influenced by the Judeo-Christian, which is a beautiful tradition. However, there were very specific ideas about God. God was a man, God was certain names, God was in heaven or whatever. You can argue different degrees of that. But Emma Curtis Hopkins was tapping into something that was so large and so amazing in terms of when you look at world religion and philosophy, in terms of the Eastern traditions, the earthen traditions, the First Nations traditions, all of our ancestors who were once upon a time speaking to God with dancing and drumming and singing. And I think she was trying to take us back to that idea of the faces of God, the personalities of God, the personal aspect of God, and what God means to us personally. So she gave us these 350 words, names, but what she was really inviting us to do was to take our spiritual, our deeply spiritual experience with a power greater than we are, in terms of how it touches us deeply and dearly, and then to somehow capture that for ourselves and to add it to our God vocabulary in terms of being able to see and feel God in ever deeper, richer ways. And so I love that. That was my takeaway. And I studied that in a couple of different classes I had through the years with really good teachers I had, and that was my takeaway. And, not the fact that she had just done that, but then I was supposed to go into my life and say, okay, where do I find the faces of God, the feelings of God, and how do I connect ideas with that? And of course, the greatest connection we need to make is what God is within us, because that is also the truth too, that there is no place where God is not. So God is in us, we are in God, is that whole thing. Several years ago, I remember it was in February, and I had a couple of sons who were living in Seattle at that time, and they had been off on their own for a while as young adults, and so I'm sure some of you can relate to this. It's one thing to have our kids in our houses, and we go through the terrible twos, and we go through them going to school, and then we go through teenager, and we think, oh my God, when's this ever going to end? Because they couldn't go through such obnoxious, wonderful expressions, right? And so, but what I learned is that when my kids got out there on their own, that's when it was really hard, actually, because oh my God, they have apartments, jobs, keys, they have significant others, they're making decisions. What are they going to do with themselves? And so I had gotten word that maybe I needed to sort of go up and check in with them and see how they were doing. I just kind of got some signals from them that I wondered what was going on. Just because I loved them, my kids can live their own lives, but it's that I don't think that we ever stop being that parent, as some of you know. It's really interesting. Some of the best night's sleep are when your adult children are in the same four walls as you at nighttime. You go to sleep, it's like, oh my God, they're here, they're safe. I gave them carrots tonight, they're going to be okay. And they're not running them out there. Anyway, so I decided to go up there. I had my little Japanese Toyota car, and the reason that's important is because it was February, and that particular winter, it was in Northern California and Southern Oregon and all the way from Northern California to Seattle, it was icy, snowy, weathery, rainy, whatever. It was a very cold winter that year. And I made plans. I took some time off where I worked. I just saved up my money and stuff. I was going to drive up there. And I really kind of put this in concrete. I'm going to go up there, And but the weather just kept getting worse and worse and worse at that time. And we all know in Northern California that when you're heading up north, you have to go through that Wairika area. You have to cross over to Oregon. It's like, oh, it's like a Donner party up there. Like, oh my God, sometimes that area gets shut down and the trucks are stacked up on the highway. So it was one of those weeks, and I kept watching the weather and stuff, and I think that was before I really had a super great cell phone. It's been several years ago, so it was more like TV and radio and things like that. And so so it's time to go, and I thought, I can't take my car up through there. So I had this idea, I'm going to cut over to Highway 101 and go up, on the coast, all the way up. So anyway, that was a freaking adventure. So anyway, so I come out, when you go through Clear Lake and stuff, I headed north. And, I think, I've been to the Redwoods a lot. I've been up to Crescent City and stuff, but in my mind, just, because I was so fixated on what going up I-5 would be, I thought, that's a pretty straight shot. No, it's not, right? And so it's curvy and up and down, and there's times, even in the Redwoods and stuff, I start to go up and I'm seeing snow collecting and say, oh my God, And I don't know if you know this, but all the elk that are up there in different places, they're like horse deer, man. They're just like hanging out around the road. I come around the corner, oh, please stay where you are, because if I hit you, you're going to walk away and my car is going to be done, And so anyway, so the trip up there, I just turned into a raisin of nerves. My whole body is so uptight. I'm grabbing my steering wheel and driving. Even when I had to stop and get gas, I could hardly peel myself out of my seat and go, because I was just so uptight. My nerves were shot and everything. It's like I've got all these miles to go. It's in Coos Bay, maybe I can head over. I'm not really sure. And so anyway, I was just so completely. I was exhausting myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, everything. And I was turning into an atheist too. It's like I had no belief I was going to make it in the wilderness. And I thought, I kept saying, why did you do this? Because I'm so hard-headed, right? So anyway, so at some point, I'd gone up into Oregon, and it was really super curvy around, and the ocean was the ocean up there is just absolutely gorgeous. But no, I couldn't enjoy that, right? But I'm driving, I'm going like this. And so I looked, and you can kind of see the curves ahead of you. And way up there, I could see this, and the sky off to the left was all, a million shades of gray, and it was stormy and everything. This milky, deep, dark grays swirling around. But way up there, all of a sudden there was this huge shaft of light just coming right down to the highway and to the edge of the coast. It was just the sun had just peaked, had just come through. There had been a break, and I just went, oh my God. And I drove and drove. I couldn't wait to get there, and I finally got there, and oh, please stay, please stay, please stay. And so I get there, and I'm on the right-hand side, and I was so excited, I just skidded over to the left. My car's going the wrong way, and I just pulled off and almost hit a guardrail and screeched to a halt. And I peeled myself out of my car. And I remember I just stood there with my face to the sun, and I just kind of opened up like this, and I could feel the warmth on my face, and my eyelids were shut, and when we have shut eyelids, there's that beautiful color that comes through. It's like, oh, thank you, God. Oh my God, this is so amazing. And in that moment, what was really incredible was I was washed over with a sense of love, safety, being watched over, nurtured through divine presence. And I really felt at that moment that in this block of sun, I was it. The sun, oh, there's Andy down there, so we're going to break through just for him. I really felt that way. I was the only person on the planet at that moment that had that shaft of sun. And so this little list I just gave you, love, feeling loved, feeling nurtured, feeling cared for, feeling the divine presence shining through just for me. When I got back in my car, I thought about Emma Curtis Hopkins. And I had, of course God is all there is, but I had this experience of just feeling absolutely the strongest was cared for and loved, in a sense of I'm going to be okay. And that part of our prayer, God is all there is, but it went beyond words. But as a human being, I was trying to translate it into meaning. And so it was like I wanted to. So when I think of Emma Curtis Hopkins, we kind of walk around, they talk about, capturing lightning in a bottle, So when that comes up, for us, we take the bottle and we capture it and say, okay, I've got this. I've got some God here that I can refer to. I've got a way of feeling God. And so I remember the rest of the trip up, which was, I started before sunlight in the morning, and by the time I was heading from Coos Bay east, I was back in the dark again, and there's more elk around Coos Bay. But I just felt buoyed. I felt like Spirit was sitting next to me in the empty seat. That sense of love, that sense of warmth, that sense of caring. Charles Fillmore, the founder of Unity, says, and he talks about the physical sun. Now, this is the other trick with Emma Curtis Hopkins, is what, and for those of you who have read Ernest Holmes, if you'll notice in his books, like The Science of Mind, whenever he gives us a word that he's laying out there as the word of God, like first cause, the unnamed, whatever it is, he will capitalize the word. And so when you read the book, that's a key. Oh, he's meaning God, right? Oh, that's what that means. And so Charles Fillmore was also a student of Emma Curtis Hopkins, and so he writes, when he says the physical sun, he capitalizes it, but he says, it's interesting, physical sun, but God, right? So he says the physical sun represents metaphysically the realm of consciousness that has been illumined by spirit alone. Divine love loves for the sake of loving. That's it. That shaft of light out there on the highway, it didn't want me to take an oath, didn't want me to join a club, didn't want me to be saved, didn't want me to find a priest, didn't want me to burn incense. It just loved for the sake of loving. That's it. I love that. Spirit alone. Divine love loves for the sake of loving. Not concerned with what or who it loves, nor with return of the love. Like the physical sun, again, in all caps, its joy is in shining forth its nature. Wow. My mind went back to this recently because of the work I do. And what I'm going to tell you about right now didn't happen really recently, but I was reading a book that got me thinking about this one event that took my mind back to this. And so when I was reading the book, and I'm going to be quoting the book here in a moment, but it kind of brought the whole thing together. Years ago, I was working with a gentleman in my other profession who was really struggling with life, could not stay sober, more than a month at a time. I was someone who had really torched their lives. A relatively young man, probably not even 30, but had already really torched his life and came from a very challenging background and had grown up around a lot of addiction and things like that. And I was working with him, and he had become very miserable in his life, and he had a lot of wreckage in his life. And so I was working with him, and it dawned on me in the work we were doing that we needed to maybe steer him in the direction of forgiveness, the power of forgiveness. I don't know how many of you have done strong forgiveness work or have ever struggled with forgiveness and then overcome it. It is absolutely liberating. It is absolutely liberating. Forgiving others, forgiving ourselves, to be able to, it's really like letting, setting something down. So I was working with him around this, and so I was trying to get him to buy into the idea of forgiveness, and he was really resistant of it. So I was trying these different approaches, and I said, what? So I decided to take this approach in terms of the value of it, and I said, okay. I said, tell me what you have felt like when people have forgiven you. He said, I don't know. And I said, why don't you know? Can you describe it at all? He said, I don't know because they never have. Wow. So recently, I was reading a book by a gentleman by the name of Ulrich E. Dupree, who is a neo-shaman in the Hawaiian traditions, and he is one of the people behind the Ho'oponopono movement on forgiveness, and that washed through our centers a while back. It was a big thing, and it was really big to me because I was in Montana at a conference one year, and there was a gentleman who did a presentation of it, and he approached it from the standpoint of inner child work. And I had been exposed to it before, and he's like, this is okay, it seemed a little formulaic to me, and I don't know, it just didn't really grab me. I went to that seminar, and when he did the inner child piece, oh my God. I don't know how many of you have done inner child work. Where have we taken ourselves? And that sort of thing. And what have we exposed our inner child to? That beautiful light, that beautiful being of love. Where have we taken? What have we done with it? That's amazing. So anyway, I was in Barnes & Noble, and I picked up this little small book, and it was great, and I was reading it, and so I want to share with you a quote from him. He said, Hawaiian shamans believe that there is no problem that cannot be resolved through love, which is, according to him, aloha. Yeah, isn't that great? You know, in Hawaii, like, you say aloha when you come and go. Really what you're saying is love, love, you know. Hello, love. I see you coming. Love, I see you going away. Aloha, isn't that cool? Because that's like their kind of word for everything. Get some flowers, you know, right? Okay. Okay. Cannot be resolved. There is no problem that cannot be resolved through love. However hopeless it may be, the reason for this is love is the greatest power in the universe. Just as there is no darkness in the sun, the real sun, all caps, S-U-N, there is no negativity in love. And this is the reason why love expresses forgiveness can heal. Why love expresses forgiveness. So let's go back to Fillmore. Love for the sake of loving. Period. That's it. No reciprocity, no offering, no incense, nothing. Love for the sake of love. To forgive. Now, if you notice today, when you came in, I have a piece of paper there for you. And it says on it, because you and I are a center for spiritual living. So, I've been turned on to something recently, being with the Chico Center. A few years ago, they kind of came up with this idea. Maybe it was in CSL widely, and because I don't run a center anymore, I've been a little bit out of the loop of things. So maybe this came out of CSL widely, I'm not really sure. But it was this concept of, we call ourselves Center for Spiritual Living. The organization, Centers for Spiritual Living, the centers are a center for spiritual living. But in Chico, we started to play with this idea, wait a minute, am I a center for spiritual living? Right? Which means, like today, right now, I'm in the Center for Spiritual Living. In a little bit, I'll go get my car and I'll go off into my world. And as I go, am I a center for spiritual living? I love that. I've just been so captivated with that idea. And so let's take just a moment and think about what Fillmore says, love for the sake of loving, as this great high spiritual ideal. And what would it be like if that were part of my mantra, my way of being in the world, of I just love for the sake of loving, period, as a center for spiritual living. I got someone in front of me, and I'm late. It's my problem that I'm late going somewhere, and they don't know what shade of green to go on, right? And so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I'm getting really impatient, and they don't hear me because it's hot these days, so my windows are up. I have air conditioning on. However, am I energetically, what energy am I putting out there to the world? What energy am I putting out? 4-letter words, impatience, upset. Andy, your Center for Spiritual Living. Oh. Okay. Darn it. Right? Okay. But, imagine how powerful that can be if it's like, because Fillmore says love for the sake of living. Period. No reciprocity. They sit there through a couple changes of lights. Love. Right? So imagine this idea of the willingness to forgive. Why? Because I'm a center for spiritual living. Now, I am in no way saying if anyone has been abusive to any of you or done horrible things, you have a right to set your boundaries and not have them physically in your life. You have a right to that. I'm not saying that. However, forgiveness is a different thing. Because when we don't forgive, they may be 100 miles away. We may have all kinds of court orders and that they can't come around, but we are tied to them unless we can forgive. To love just because we need to love. Because, you know how you have an inner child? So do they. Because that's the other side of inner child work. Inner child work is we work with our inner child, but we also recognize everyone else has one too. And what's the story behind that, right? And believe me, the gentleman I worked with, he's not somebody who it would not be pleasant to be in a relationship with him. However, he has an inner child, and however, he comes from a really challenging place, and someone who has never felt forgiveness. And so we have to kind of he needs to rebuild that, right? But our job is to show up. I mean, we think about these great stories that we celebrate, this great literature, Jesus being crucified. Forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? And we all, oh my God, that's the gold standard, right? But as Edmund Curtis Hopkins would say, God is not the gold standard. God is right here. 350 names of God, and we're one of those names of God. And so our job also is to love for the sake of loving, right? Okay. So to end today, I want to do a little call and response. And so you got your little thing there. Because you and I are a Center for Spiritual Living. And so I'm going to do this 3 times because I believe, I love the word 3. I love the number 3 because that means mind, body, and soul. So we want to take this into our mind, body, and soul. So I'm going to role play, and then when I point at you, I want you to say this together. So my role play is, I can't believe, considering how horrible I've been to you in this situation, I can't believe that you're forgiving me. Why in the world would you forgive me?
Because you and I are a center for spiritual living.
I just can't imagine how heinous I've been to you and how unthinking I've been and how unforgivable I am. But you're forgiving me. I don't understand why.
Because you and I are a center for spiritual living.
I have never been touched so deeply in my life by anyone who has extended me the love of forgiveness. How in the world could you do this to me?
Because you and I are a center for spiritual living.
All right. And so it is.
So it is.
So I'm going to take this, I ran a little bit long, so I'm going to do a prayer, but I promise it'll be like economic. All right. So as we come together in consciousness, I am so grateful to be here today in the midst of this Center for Spiritual Living, but in the midst also of all the beloved expressions of spirit in this room that are also all centers for spiritual living. And I know that as we go forward as centers for spiritual living, that we affect ourselves, and we affect those around us, and we affect the greater world in ever greater loving ways. I am so grateful for this, and in my gratitude for this, I let my word go, knowing that it's so. And so